Hello, hello, and welcome to another edition of Wander and Muse. I'm Heather Wolpern, your host, and today's guest is Dominic Arizona Bonuccelli. Bonuccelli.
Let's use your hands.
Yes. Even on the radio, let's use our hands. So nice to have you here.
Thank you. Super nice to be here.
Yeah, I need to give a little shout out to Ricky. See, there I go. I'm
Ricky Rad.
Yeah, she should be called Ricky
That's
Rad.
her, like roller derby name.
I love it. Mine is The Heathen.
The Heathen. Nice.
A shout out to Nikki Roddy for introducing us. She was on previously when we talked about her very cool horny toad horticulture.
Yes, the urban farm in Tucson. Yes, she is a rock star.
She is a rock star. But today we're here to talk about you.
Yeah.
Oh, I think your background is really interesting. From the wee boy at University of Southern California.
We lad.
To going on to visiting what I'm sure the number is past 80 countries now.
It's getting there. It's actually the low 70s now that I'm just getting into Chile and Argentina. Yes.
Okay.
But the next, when we start talking about the motorcycle trip, the next phase will get it up past 100.
Right. Yeah. So do you have one of those in our garage? We have one of those world maps.
Yes.
Where it's completely black, but then you see the tiny little outline of a country, and then you get your penny and scratch off the country until all the countries are.
Oh, is it like an advent calendar and there's a little baby Jesus under the Botswana when you... That would be cool. Actually, we have the analog version is more satisfying because it's something tactile, right?
Right.
We have the phone app version. There's an app called VoyageX.
Okay.
And you can tick off the countries and you can tick off the provinces or departments in each country.
Right.
So we've been using that because it's up to date with, things like Tibet would have been considered its own country, but now it's considered part of China.
Right.
Things like that. So the number is lower than my number is lower than it should be.
Right.
I consider Tibet its own country, etc.
I do too.
Yes.
Yes, exactly.
We use the app version.
Yeah, a friend of mine is getting very close to visiting all the countries, and there are two different schools of thought on how to count the countries. So one might be what you're talking about, where it's the number's more like 193 instead of 172 or something.
Yeah, right.
You know what I'm talking about?
I think it should be like 205, but it's like 197.
Yeah.
Like
197 might be right. Yeah. So I'm thinking at this point, my goal, as of earlier this year, I made a goal to at least hit each continent.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
summit the highest peak of each one. Or go to the lowest point of each continent. That might be a little easier. Badwater in Death Valley.
I like that idea. Well, in Guatemala, I did hike to the highest point. So
really,
check.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Where's that? I don't know.
We hiked up a Cantonango where we could then look across at Fuego erupting. But then actually that wasn't the highest point. Then the next camping, like 2 days later, was the highest point. And what the heck was that called? Something with a T, 3 syllables. I'm not good like that.
But a volcano.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's get back to you. So of note, some of the things that you've done already are just, I think, really impressive. And I would love to know how you got those jobs. But then we also are going to talk about your next adventure. But let's rewind first. So talk even a little bit about USC and how then you were like, okay, I want to do this for a living.
Yes. Well, I grew up in Spokane, Washington, Spokanistan, which qualifies more.
Go Zags.
Yeah, you know the Zags. Yeah, totally. They've really been on the map the last 10 years.
I'm not a sports person, but somehow I know that.
Nor am I. Well, so Gonzaga University is in Spokane, but Gonzaga Prep was a Jesuit high school that I went to before going off to USC.
Okay.
And it was a great place to go because they had a lot of AP classes and for getting into the schools. And but my senior year in high school, I auditioned for the NBC channel. Had a requirement for their community service portion of their business that they had to have 30 hours of programming of community service every month or something.
Okay.
And so they had a live teen talk show called Airwaves. And so a friend of mine who I'm still buddies with was hired as the girl, and I was the boy, and we were both seniors in Spokane. And we had, 13 or 16 episodes about gun control, about, new friends moving to school, things that were real hard,
current events,
cutting edge,
social impact.
Yes, very impactful. But it was a cool experience to, you know, and then it was a nice foothold to get into USC. I think that USC requires a quota from each region of the country and each country around the planet. So that helped out anyway. But once I got into USC, I mean, my dream was always to be Steven Spielberg or a film director. I loved Indiana Jones growing up. So I got into the film school for film production and went through the program. And it was really cool to be there in Los Angeles. I mean, it was and is the epicenter, of course, of film. But this was before digital. I was there, you know, from 90 to 93. Right. And so it just, as I went through the program and I started to intern at Paramount and work on some commercials and stuff, just as a peon, you know. Yeah. It just was so nepotistic. I'm sure. Nepo babies. I'm sure. All over before that was even a term. I mean, we had Sophia Loren's son in my film class, and he was Italian, you know, and he kept Eduardo Ponti, something like that. Okay. And he would come with a couple of supermodels and, you know, a cigar to every class, slick back hair. Yes. There was just so much of the, you know, which was great. I get it. Well, like did he have talent too? Because I never saw him produce anything. I didn't follow up afterwards. Okay. Yeah. I want to just give him the benefit of the doubt. Yes. Like maybe he had boatloads of talent. Who knows? Well, ironically, ADDing off to people that had talent from school. My first year of film school, it was people from every country on the floor, on the dorm floor. That's cool. And right across the floor was a guy named Sebastian Cordero, and he was from Ecuador. Okay. And so he was in a few of my student films. He was in the filmic writing program. Well, he went back subsequently to Ecuador and became the biggest director. Really? Yeah, and I kind of had lost touch with him, and I didn't really know until 2 months ago, driving my motorcycle through Ecuador. I called him up because people said, "Oh, Sebastian's, you know, there in Quito, and you should look him up." So he's told me about, you know, what it was like leaving film school, going back to Ecuador, taking 6 years to pull financing together to make his, just fascinating, you know, the connections that he made. Yeah, those years. But so he followed his dream and became a director. But I kind of got disillusioned with it as time went on, and it was just so financial, and there was so much pressure, and there were a lot of prima donnas in LA. That they're just a lot of terrible people. So my senior year, I switched to. I met a guy who was British, and he was doing the photography program in the film school. Okay. We had a lab in the basement, and it was, of course, doing things with, you know, in the darkroom with enlargers, with the red light on. I love all that. I did that in high school. Oh, really? Yeah. That's cool. Really lucky. Access to that. Mm-hmm. Really lucky. The sensory deprivation chamber, right? No, I loved it. Hours would vanish. Yeah. When I thought I'd been there for half an hour, somehow it was like 3.5 hours had passed. Yes. It was wild. Totally. And it's just alchemy, right? You're using your hands to burn and dodge, and then you put the paper on the tray, and it's just magically. Remember the project with the rubber cement where you put like rubber cement on anything you don't want the color to go on? You know what I'm talking about? Then you rub it off, and then you have this like really cool black and white image with like a pink dress. Illustration. Yeah, yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah, yeah. Stuff like that. Like just funky things you could do. That sounds like, do you ever see the NXS video for New Sensation? You know that Australian band from the 80s? Yeah. Yeah, and they shot it in Europe at some big like mansion, but they light painted all over. Oh, people. Right. So it was not film, it was like just photographs, right? But like 10 frames per second, and each one had light painting on the singer's head. That's cool. Yeah. I actually know what you're talking about. That's cool. Okay, so continue. Anyway, so then last we left our hero, I did just a year of that, and then moved up to Seattle. I didn't want to go back to Spokane because it was a pretty small town at the time. Although in Corona times it's grown quite a bit. But I wanted to go to Seattle because that was the epicenter of everything in the 90s. This was 1994. Mm-hmm. So I moved up there, just kind of total greenhorn, started working at a photo lab. Mm-hmm. All night long, but then I was trying to get my book out to newspapers and things, and big city newspapers are usually staff, and people have worked there for 40 years. They're unions, and it's really hard to break into. Mm-hmm. So the easier mode is to do local neighborhood newspapers, or alternative newspapers like Tucson Weekly. Mm-hmm. Back then there was Seattle Weekly, and that was like the best thing that ever happened to me. It led to so many random things. Oh, good. And they would just give you, you know, an assignment. So it was all black and white mostly, except for if you were shooting the cover back then. Mm-hmm. And they would give you an assignment to go shoot, you know, the chef at the restaurant, or go shoot the mini golf, or this new business, and so you would get a chance I'd be working at the photo lab 4 days a week, but then the rest of the time I would be meeting people in the community who needed photos to promote their own business.
One thing led to another.
It was networking that I didn't even have to work at. Right. And then I would get the free publicity.
Net funding?
Yeah, is that what it's called?
I don't know. Let's make something up.
And then, you'd get promotion in the newspaper. They didn't have to pay for it because your name would be on the, and then you could sell the photos. The photos that you shot generally for a newspaper like that, you own the copyright.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and this kind of became, it is nice like that. That sort of became the business model for a lot of other things like Rick Steves eventually down the line, where I kept the copyright and could resell the
images. That's huge.
Yeah, that was huge. It's not always like that now.
Right.
Especially with corporate jobs.
Right.
And, NDAs and things like that.
All that.
Yeah. So I started shooting for the newspaper, and then that ended up leading about a year or two later to meeting Rick Steves.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. They gave me an assignment, and I was, remember also at the time, there's no internet, right? This is 1996 or something.
Right.
It's just fledgling. But the internet was being grown in Seattle.
Right.
And Starbucks, and grunge music was still kind of going on. But yeah, Kurt Cobain had just passed away. That was one of my assignments for Seattle Weekly, was to shoot the bench outside on the street outside of his house where everyone had carved all of their, notes to him. So there were just so many things happening in Seattle.
It's got to be a valuable photo.
Yeah. It was, a cool experience. And then after the market kind of exploded in Seattle later in the decade, I was getting a lot of shoots to go out and do architectural photos of people's houses right on the lake, and they wanted to prove that they lived there before they had to liquidate everything and move to a small town.
Seriously?
Yeah, it was just an interesting decade in Seattle. Yeah.
Right.
But the Rick Steves thing came up. They assigned me to shoot, one photo of him. It was a one-page article.
Okay.
I didn't know who he was at the time. I thought he had a Mexican restaurant. His name sounds like someone who should run a churro stand or something. So Ricardo Estebanes in Edmonds, Washington. I'm like, all right, I'll go drive.
Yeah.
So he has the same shop in Edmonds, Washington right now. It's a little Main Street town. And he sells the backpacks in his guidebooks, but he also has the section of tour divas and divos. If you're planning a trip to Europe, you can go in and they'll sit with you. It doesn't cost anything, and they'll give you suggestions for train routes and Rome to Rio website.
So the Rick Steves version of the AAA trip.
Yeah, exactly.
Thing, whatever it's called. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
It's the AAA model, totally.
Yeah.
But then they also, his bread and butter, Rick Steves, is selling guided tours to Europe. So I'm sure they talk about that.
He's done that for decades, right?
Forever. I think since, the mid-'80s or something.
Right.
Yeah. The way that he started his company was when he was out of college, he looked a lot like Shaggy from Scooby-Doo.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And he went to, the old photos are classic.
I've got to find one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'll send you some goodies. And he went to Amsterdam, and did he buy a van in Amsterdam? I think that was the very first trip. He bought a van, and he did a tour of 6 people. I think it ended up being all women.
Okay.
Independent travelers from Amsterdam to Afghanistan.
Wow.
It was very ambitious.
Yeah. I'm picturing that on a map. That is ambitious. That's a good way to put it.
I think that's right. I think maybe it ended in Istanbul, but I'm pretty sure it was
Still, they covered some ground.
Yes. And so then he slowly parlayed that into a little bit like Tony Wheeler in Australia with Lonely Planet. He eventually parlayed that into his empire.
Yeah.
But now I think it's still the same. Like now he shoots shows for PBS and he donates those to PBS. He doesn't make any money off the television shows.
Yeah, no, that's interesting.
Yeah, but just like me with the newspaper, it's free publicity for him, and
get your name out there.
People to go on his tours.
Right.
Yeah. So when I went up there that day, I didn't know who he was. And he's like, well, let's just walk around the block, Hi, Dominic. He was super courteous, very kind to a greenhorn 20-something-year-old.
Right.
He's like, let's just walk around the block. And, I had a roll of 36 T-Max black and white film.
Film.
Yes. Totally analog. Grainy. The grainier, the better.
Yeah.
And so we walked around the block, and then there was like a blow-up a plastic globe at one of the stores next door. So he was peering through this translucent globe like a James Bond villain, kind of.
Did you snap a picture?
Yeah, that was the one that went into the article.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Yay. Cool. So you two just hit it off, or how did that then turn into you?
Yeah, I think that next summer, then he hired me to do our first job, which essentially has lasted 25 years more or less. Although I've been sabbatical for a year or two.
Right.
But yeah, and the gig back then was to trade more or less the rights to the photos.
Okay.
He was going to be paying for the trip. Essentially, I was following along on the trip, which is like 3 weeks, best of Europe, 6 countries. You ride on the bus, you eat the meals, you go see all the sites.
Right.
And then, but I retained all the copyright to the images. And so he was able to, he had unlimited, what is it called? Yeah, unlimited usage, no time limit. He could use them for whatever he wants, but I retained the copyright so I could sell them for stock photos afterwards. And then, each year we changed it a little bit.
Yeah, but that sounds reasonable. Yeah. A decent win-win.
Yeah, it worked out great for me.
Yeah.
If I had art shows or if I was doing stock photos down the line. Yeah. But he has a similar paradigm with his guides also. Okay. Because a lot of his business, he's probably got 100 people in Edmonds that, are the staff and the admin and everything. Gotcha. But he's got tour guides in pretty much every city and every country in Europe. And he is like the Energizer Bunny when he goes to do a recon trip over there. He's every day meeting 3 or 4 guides, testing them out, seeing how they are with facts and figures and people, and then he's hiring new people, and the best city guides that really that the customers have a strong reaction to eventually become the whole country guides or multi-country guides down the line.
What a good gig!
Yeah, I think it is a nice gig for the guides.
Exactly. So then, how did you then move on to Lonely Planet?
Planeta Soltera. So then, serendipitously,
don't you love it when life is like that, where it's just like...
Yes, and when you look back, right, you have this vision. It's like, oh, of course, this thing led to this thing. Yeah. But when you're living it, it seems so random.
So random. Yeah, yeah, that's cool.
So in 2001, before 9/11, about 8 months before, I was just getting a little bit burned out. I'd been working sort of a decade or 8 years in Seattle, and I just needed a break. So my girlfriend at the time and I went to have a year sabbatical back then, and we went to Australia, and we bought a camper van in Melbourne. And we drove across the desert for about a year, a little bit of Southeast Asia.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah, it was really cool. And at the time, all my fellow photographer friends in Seattle were like, "Oh, this is the worst thing you could possibly do. You're going to lose all of your clients. Everyone's going to forget who you are."
They were
right?
Just jealous.
Well, yeah. I mean, even now, when I did it a couple of years ago, I got that same recommendation from people. Yeah. There's a lot of fear of losing momentum.
Yeah, and even not work related. Just since I travel a fair amount too, when I say where I'm going, especially if I'm going by myself somewhere, like the Guatemala hiking trip, that was by myself. I did meet up with some, group of people there, but there were so many people who just were so fearful about it. Like, oh, are you kidding? Why isn't Tom going? Or whatever. I'm like, I'll be fine, And so I guess I'm just not a very fear-based person, but so many people just are.
For sure.
So they barely leave the town where they were born and raised, which is fine. If that's what suits them, that's great.
For sure. But yeah,
but there's a whole world out there.
Yes, and so much of that fear is projected, right? It's just unnecessary worry.
Right.
That when you get there, I mean, this motorcycle trip, which we'll get to eventually, has been 99.9% kind people. Like there are so few bad things that have happened.
Right.
And had I spent 5 years angsting and worrying about it, it would have been life force wasted.
Right. And even when I'm sure you've been in many situations, and I know I have not many, but some, where all of a sudden I was like, oops, maybe that wasn't the best idea. When something happened where, you're in the middle of nowhere and you don't have cell phone range, whatever. But it all works out. And that's what turns it into an adventure. And that's what keeps the story going for years down the road because of the mishap.
Yes.
Or, but so often when things like that have happened, the locals, who sometimes don't even share a language, still would do anything they could to help you. And it just is so comforting and heartwarming to know that most of the people in the world, regardless of where they live, are decent people. They're gonna help you.
Yes.
Sure, there's some jerks out there, but generally speaking, people are good, right?
100%. And that's one thing I learned in film school that was a bit of a eureka moment to me, was that you don't. There's no story if everything goes brilliantly. Right?
Exactly.
It's super boring. They all lived happily ever after is not the movie.
Right.
It's the angsting and the chaos. And
plot twist.
Yeah. And so when you look back on a trip that has been chaos, or you got Giardia, or your bike broke down, or something. I mean, that's the story that you tell 1,000 times.
Right.
That's part of the sweetness of the
exactly
of the epic adventure.
Speaking of bikes breaking down, when I was doing a little bit of research on you to get a little more familiar, I did come across this one photo of your dirt bike in Bolivia, and it was completely dismantled. Yes. It was just this raw open heart surgery of a bike. So what the heck happened there?
Yeah, it looked like Mel Gibson at the end of Braveheart, right? When he was being disemboweled on the table. You don't get to see that shot. You just close up on his face, but you can just picture his thorax, right? That's what the bike looked like. Yeah. Oh, it was, yeah. I've been trying to drive this motorcycle down to Argentina, and it's been fairly smooth. I'm no mechanic, is the problem. Mm-hmm. I don't have, a couple of pannier boxes of tools, nor would I know what to do with them if I even did. Right. But there's bike shops the whole way down. Sure. And car washes about every 5 blocks, the whole way through South America. So in Bolivia, the bike, it ended up being the coils in the generator, so the electrical was not maintaining. So it was just not going to run anyway. But I was just in the middle of, like, the highest point of the Andes in Bolivia. To preface, Bolivia already is rustic. Like, it's like you're driving through 1830s, the Wild West in a lot of places, Right. It's just off the map. And right now, they're having kind of an economic crisis, and so they won't sell, generally, gasoline to foreigners. Oh. And I didn't even realize that before I went in, because rule number 1 of my sabbatical trip is the plan is no plan.
I love it.
Yeah. So I haven't been doing research. I haven't been, I just show up on a road. If I come to a crossroads,
you take it.
I see which way the crow is sitting on the signpost, and then I follow the crow. Right. It's been like that.
I love it.
Yeah. So when I got to Bolivia, I came in from Peru, and I went past Lake Titicaca, and when I got to La Paz, I must have stopped at 20 gas stations, and no one would sell me gasoline. And I have a double-sized tank on the bike, and that helps. But it's an old dirt bike, so it doesn't go, forever. Right. And then after talking to a few people, I realized they have a little bit leftist government of Bolivia nationalized a lot of the industries, including the refineries. Okay. They have oil in Bolivia, but they, all the foreign investment has gone away more or less. Okay. And they don't have a big reserve of dollars, and no one wants to trade right now in Bolivianos because their economy is faltering. Gotcha. So they've been having a hard time importing enough gasoline, and they haven't been refining it. So they will sell it to only citizens. So you have to buy it at hardware stores, like chainsaw gasoline.
Oh my goodness.
A liter at a time. Or sometimes houses, you can go knock on the back door.
Seriously?
Yeah, but it's illegal for them, so it's a little bit dangerous.
Oh my goodness.
You're in the mountains, like grandma will sell you some gasoline at...
it's like prohibition, but with gasoline.
Yeah, it totally is. Yeah.
Wow. Like keep it on the down low. Huh.
So that's been
you made it.
So I made it. Yeah. I figured out the gas situation. I got a 10-liter plastic tank on the back, extra tank on the back of the bike. So I could usually find someone to sell me something for 4 times the price. But then the bike went out, and I was in the Andes at about 13,500 feet. So,
you're already huffing and puffing.
Oh my God.
Because of the elevation.
Yeah. Just walking the 5 steps into the hotel, you're like,
yeah, been there. Yep.
Yeah, Yeah. And so the bike went out in between Potosi, which was the silver mining capital of the Spanish Empire. Okay. Potosi is where they minted all of the coins for Spain, pieces of 8, all those coins for 400 years. Interesting. And so there are a bunch of silver mines still up there, but I was in a smaller town called Porco, which is an even older Incan silver mine. Okay. And I'm pushing the bike into town like Cad Bane in Star Wars or something. And I'm just like, sweating, and I can't breathe. And there's no hotels, there's no bike shops. So anyway, long story short, it was a week ordeal of lifting the bike into pickup trucks, having to beg people with their fruit trucks to let me put the bike in. Yeah. Back to this city, back to this shop. And 4 shops later, after I'd almost given up and thought I was going to have to just push the bike across the border into Chile, I found this kind of hermit in this Star Warsian town called Uyuni, which is the salt flats of Bolivia, the biggest salt flats in the world. Okay. Where they test some of the cars that go 300 miles an hour out on the salt plain. And this guy had a fleet of Suzukis, my exact bike.
Wait, what?
Yeah, totally random. And I mean, this town is practically like 20 by 20 blocks. Right. And I was in the back, I had the bike in the truck, and I was riding through, and I'm like, well, I may as well look up on my phone and see if there's even anything. And this guy did Suzuki DRZ 400 tours out to the salt flats. I'm like, oh, yeah.
So did you buy a new one, or did you fix yours with his help, or how did you then get back on your bike and go.
Well, I thought about abandoning. Well, in the salt flats here, there are abandoned locomotives from the 1800s, just rusted over in the salt without not even on a track. So I thought maybe this is where my bike dies. Maybe it just sits by the locomotive. But we got it going. I had to come back. You can't get parts for most Japanese bikes in Bolivia. It's a lot of Chinese bikes that are, a third the price.
Right.
So I had to come back with my backpack to the States, and then I brought back new parts, and he got to run it. He got to go.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And so then you made it back to Tucson, Arizona shortly thereafter?
Yeah, about a month ago I came back.
Okay, and you're still in sabbatical because you are about to head back out.
Yes.
So talk about this adventure. And is the why just for sake of adventure, or are you going to have a book at the end of it, or are you just getting in touch with your deepest self?
I think it's going to be a musical.
Da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
Jazz hands.
Yeah, totally. The producers, totally, like Moana, I think, eventually. In an animated musical, totally. Or
maybe Disney. I'm sure you have friends from USC who are tight with Disney. It could be an animated version.
That's true. You know what? Also in my class was the lady that ended up doing Lilo and Stitch.
Okay.
And she pitched that in one of our film classes, and we were all like, that's really cool. And then it exploded. So yeah, I guess I should make some phone calls. I've sort of lost touch.
That's hilarious.
But, well, the impetus for this sabbatical trip was a little bit like 20 years ago, cyclically, 20 years later, I just was getting burned out again a little bit.
That happens.
Yes. And I think, the theory is every Vulcan life cycle, you're supposed to change up something in your life, right? Like 7-year itch.
Yes.
Change where you live, change your relationship, change your job, change your haircut, something major.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So I was overdue, and I was shooting a lot of different things, doing some film, doing some music videos, doing architectural stuff. And I just was, and then Corona times hit. Right. And I thought, that was for a lot of photographers and artists, that was a horrid time because all the commissions dried up, right? And people were cutting back on their marketing.
Right.
But ironically, here in Arizona, we were still pretty open, and we were still doing photo shoots for Tucson Guide. We were still shooting restaurants out on the patio at St. Philip's Plaza, right? People just taking their masks off outside, spread out for the shoots. So things really didn't slow down,
right?
And a lot of travelers were getting stuck at borders at that time, like people that were doing van life through South America were trapped at the border town, which is always the worst city in any country, right? Tijuana, and you can't get across the border.
Nowhere you want to stay put,
Yeah. So I was like, okay, when the world opens back up after Corona times, and if I could just get things to slow down, then I've been dreaming about this motorcycle trip for 10 years. And I wanted to do a trip where I was not thinking about creating art for everybody else.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
I sort of felt like when you work for Lonely Planet or you're doing travel jobs, everybody's like, oh my God, that has to be the best job ever, right? Don't you love it? And yes, it's super luxurious and, knock on wood, I feel lucky, but you can't completely enjoy it because you're always thinking, especially if you're shooting for stock photos or even the Rick Steves thing, you've got 2 days in Venice. Go shoot every bridge, every waterway, every prettiest sunrise and sunset. So you're just stressed out a lot.
Right.
You're not just,
And you even think about composition differently. If you know something's going to be a magazine spread, you're like, okay, I need some good horizontals. I need some, negative space where the copy can be, it just it 100%. Shifts things. It takes the fun out of it.
Yes, 100%. Exactly. Yeah. Oh, I got to shoot vertical now because social media, magazine covers social media are more vertical. Whereas when the internet first came out, everyone wanted horizontal, super wide horizontal with negative space.
You're right. Yeah.
So you're just always in this work mode, and I wasn't enjoying it. I was feeling like I was phoning it in a little bit. So it has been awesome. So the only 2 rules on this motorcycle trip have been to get from Tucson down to Argentina was the start. The plan is no plan. And the second rule, the only other law on the trip is if someone recommends something, I have to do it. Unless it's a cartel guy and he says, get in the trunk, then I don't do it.
Right.
But I've been just meeting people, in the plazas or whatever, or Airbnb hosts, and they're all so proud of their country.
Right.
And they're like, oh, you got to see this waterfall, or go out to where the monarch butterflies are.
Totally.
Michoacan, everyone recommends something, and so I try to do every rec.
Yep, I love that. And I live by that too.
Yeah.
Yes, because not too long ago, maybe 2 months ago or so, I went out to Abiquiu, New Mexico with a friend of mine. Good little road trip. And went out to the Ghost Ranch to check out Georgia O'Keeffe's old, stomping ground. That's really beautiful. But in this tiny little town of Abiquiu, we were staying in a yurt, and there was one convenience store, and there's a woman with two teenage girls selling pastries to raise money for the high school girls to go on a trip to Washington, D.C. I was like, sure, I'll support this trip. I'd love to buy some pastries and help you get out to this debate thing in Washington, D.C. What a great experience for these two girls from that itty bitty little town in New Mexico. Yes, But just from talking to this woman, she then recommended two different places. And one, you need a little code, Plaza Blanca. You need a code to get into the gate, but then my friend and I were the only people there, and there are all these like really cool flagstone, funky, cool spires, towers. It was very otherworldly, and the sun was setting. But then we were sort of like, we should get out of here. We're the only people around for miles. And then another time we went to kind of by the Ghost Ranch. She said, when you come to this, then you take a left and you go 26 miles. And we're like, okay. And we went to this monastery, and it ended up being beautiful. And we never would have even known about it, or even if we read about it, we might not have gone. But it was because of a local saying, no, take this dirt road. And same thing, we're like, what's really going to be at the end of the dirt road?
Yeah, exactly.
But when you get there, it's like, oh, this is beautiful. I'm so glad we went. So anyway. So you're going to have this amazing adventure.
To segue off of Georgia O'Keeffe, being a fellow artist, to see some of the studios and the play, around the world where places have created their most amazing art, like Arles in south of France, where Van Gogh was, right, where he painted Starry Starry Night on this on this motorcycle route. One of my pilgrimage spots, I mean, probably in the top three, was Frida Kahlo's space in Mexico City.
Yeah.
And it is a big tourist attraction, of course. I mean, going to the Blue House, I mean, there's kind of like lines around the block.
Right.
And the Blue House is amazing. Like the concrete is painted sunshine yellow throughout the whole house. It just radiates happiness, It has ceilings of it like this cool space. Okay. But even cooler, I think, is the Diego and Frida's painting studios. Right. Which is maybe a mile or two away.
Diego's is in Guanajuato, isn't it?
That's the part of exactly that's the part. Not far from where the house is, totally. And hers is next door, and next to both of theirs is the architect that designed the spaces. I can't remember his name right now, but he was a real visionary.
Oh, cool.
And he has some paintings and murals in there too. But Diego's is this very massive. They're all very modern, the painting studios. Diego's is pretty big. And there are a lot of paper mache skeletons in there. Some of them that have braces that Frida would have worn, because of her spinal issues after the accident. And there's a catwalk that connects his studio to hers. Okay. But it's precarious, And Diego was not a small guy.
No.
And he was well fed. Yes. It was very healthy and hearty. Yes. And hardy. So the catwalk connects way up on the roof, and then there's this precarious staircase that comes down the side of without a railing, that enters into Frida's space. Okay. And at the time that I was there, Frida's space is a little bit smaller, but I couldn't get into it because at the base there was a security guard guy. And so I will talk to everyone. I want to talk to, my Italian grandpa would talk to everyone at the hardware store. And
you inherited that.
Yeah.
That's good.
And whistling in the garden. So I was just talking to the guy. He's like, "Oh, we're repainting." He's like, "You can't go in right now because just the walls, you'll get paint all over." Right. But he's like, "There's nothing in there anyway because it's an empty space, and we still use it to have art shows for artists." How cool would that be? Can you imagine being a beginning, muralist or a photographer, and your show is in Frida Kahlo's studio where she painted most of her? I mean, that's so cool that they're still using the space.
That is very
cool. Not just roped off with museum ropes and the lasers.
Yes, using it for art. I love it.
Yeah, someday. So that's on the bucket list now too. I'd like to have a show of something.
That would be cool. Yeah, make it happen. Yeah, you can make that happen. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I think if I tie it in with if this becomes a book eventually, and the story of that is in the book, maybe I can work my way in.
I know you're on sabbatical now, but do you think you'll be having a show in Tucson again soon?
Well, The plan down the line is to have a multi-purpose space in Tucson. About 6 years ago, with a fellow photographer, Remy Haynes, and we opened a gallery in San Diego.
Oh,
and it was in Solana Beach.
Okay.
We did it for about a year, and it was a really cool experience, but it's very expensive over there.
I bet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were thinking that would be a good spot because all the mega mansions are essentially in Solana Beach and Rancho. What is that? Rancho Santa Fe? Is that what's just east of there? Like Oprah's Horse Ranch, Justin Timberlake. All it's the highest priced zip code in the United States. It's just east of there.
Oh, is it? Okay.
So, but what we discovered after a while is there is a little more. Although there is more money, there's a little bit of a conservative mentality and taste for art. So kind of only the things that sold were like Tuscan landscapes, not some of the more interesting things.
Right.
Yeah. So I would like to have a space in Tucson where the appreciation for art is a little more feral and edgy. And but not just a gallery space. It might be for live music. It might be for podcasts. It can be. I want to park some old, BSA 1960s motorcycles in the middle and have it just be an interesting space that's always rotating.
That's fun. I like it. Yeah. Can't wait to see you make that happen.
Yeah, come on down. I'll pay you.
And then I shouldn't say back in your photography days because you're still in your photography days. You're just on sabbatical is all. But man, this list of names here is pretty impressive. So, Stephen Hawking, how cool. Channing Tatum, Salma Hayek, Kenneth Branagh, Barack Obama, and Sting. Is he the coolest person in the world or no?
Yeah, he was cool to me back then. I've heard from subsequent Rick Steves bus drivers that he's a little bit snooty. Oh, yeah. But, he's got to be, is he 70? I don't know. He's
Maybe more. More, yeah.
But he's probably got the right to be snooty. But he was would you like to hear the Sting story?
Yeah, I want to hear I want to hear a story for all of them.
So this was when I was in Seattle, and there was the mountain radio station was one of the kind of rock stations out there at the time. And I saw that Sting was coming through that summer to the Gorge Amphitheater, which is in the middle of Washington State. It's the most beautiful venue. Okay. Right on the Columbia River above, in the gorge above the river.
I bet it's gorgeous. And is it like a natural amphitheater where the sound just kind of bounces off of the natural?
Yeah. Oh, cool. It's not exactly like Red Rocks.
Gotcha. Well, that's what I was envisioning. Yeah.
Yeah, Red Rocks I think is the best. Yeah. But a little bit going down out to the river and just
nice.
So I called them. I just cold called them as a photographer. I'm like, hey, so I will I'll shoot this gig or shoot any gigs you want for free just to trade the photos because I was always a huge Police fan. So I just wanted to, Yeah. But I was just a kid still. And so I went out there and it was one of those days in July that was 175 degrees, right? And typical concert, they were running late. And I think Sting was doing yoga with the, meet and greet people before, like 10 special guests. Yeah. Oh, wow. Won the tickets to do yoga with him, and then he was going to do the meet and greet. So I was shooting the meet and greet of 50 people in a line, right? Okay. So they're like, we'll call you in, Dominic, 5 minutes before the concert. And then, great. So I'm waiting out there, and it was so hot. I think I ate like 12 cherry popsicles because I was just dying and melting. I had my super heavy camera bag. And so finally they're like, okay, Dominic. And it was half an hour later. They're like, super fast and, do it as fast as you can because we're already late and like everybody's mad.
Are your teeth all pink?
So I shoot this thing. Yeah. Well, I didn't know. So I shoot this thing and I go out and I just was real bossy and I'm like, okay, you over by the wall, Sting, lose the water bottle, like do the fun thing. I was just like firing them off, right? And then at the end, they were nice and let me have my picture taken with Sting. And sure enough, I looked like Ozzy Osbourne had just bit the head off of the bat. Oh, like the Joker. Why so serious?
My God.
Yeah. I gotta repost that photo.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
But Sting was cool.
He was super nice. He was really nice.
All right.
And then stupidly, his manager invited me to go shoot a next gig down in California where they were doing yoga. I think it was like a full day yoga thing. Right. And I had to pass because I was shooting a Rick Steves thing and I kicked myself for it because I should have pursued it.
Oh, well, you can't live that. You can't live like that. Yeah. Just move on. Maybe if you would have gone, you would have gotten in a car accident or something horrible. You can't live like that,
Totally.
And then what about Barack Obama? What's the Barack Obama story?
Oh, well, that one's kind of political and a little bit sad, but it was after Gabby Giffords was shot here in Tucson. Yeah. Yeah, I was working sort of with U of A, and after that incident, that's the Safeway where Gabby Giffords and other people were shot is right by where I live right now. So you see the monument every time. Yeah. It's still very poignant for all of us in Tucson, right?
Definitely. It's vivid memories of the news coverage, and outside of back then UMC, now it's Banner, but like how there were all those flowers and everything for everyone right outside, just like, oh, yeah.
Exactly. Wow. Yeah. We photographed all of that. Exactly, the testaments to her outside the hospital, but then also when Obama came and spoke at U of A after that. And it was so uplifting, and it was really nice this week to see Gabby Gifford speaking at the DNC.
I missed it. I don't know where I was, but people kept saying, "Did you see this? Did you see that?" I missed it, but I'm sure I can catch up.
Oh, it's worth watching.
Yeah.
And Mark Kelly, of course, is up there with her, and she was wonderful.
Oh.
And she will always have an extra place in my heart because she was a motorcycle rider, you know.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, if you go to Moto, Sonora here in Tucson, I believe it's still there, her old BMW, I think she had a R60 from the 70s. BMW motorcycle is in the main room.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll check it out next time I go over there.
Yeah.
Moto Sonora. I love it when they have all those like really tricked out luxury, vans basically. But where the people, they've got to be like $1 million or something for these. They're just sweet. Where people are, like the Overlanders.
Yeah.
But they're like tricked out. Yeah.
Kind of like, well, the business right next door, I can't remember the name of the business, but they're the ones that retrofit the old cruisers.
Right.
So they often do a lot of co-sponsorship.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Like a couple of years ago when the Ford Broncos were super hot, maybe 4 years ago.
Yep.
And at the Barrett-Jackson auction in Phoenix, almost all of the tents were just full of, mid-70s Broncos.
Interesting.
That people had sold for $60,000 on Facebook Marketplace or something.
Dang.
That didn't even have upholstery anymore. And then they'd refab them to be all electric. And they were reselling them at the auction for $250,000 or something. Mm-hmm. That was the flavor of the year.
Fancy. Wow. But Barack, he was a cool guy.
Super cool. I mean, you know what I found from shooting some of these film mags and stuff? The A-listers are usually really accommodating and really kind, and they're actually empathetic, and unless they're rushed and hurried, they'll look you in the eye and they'll listen to you, and you have a really good experience if you just treat them like a normal person.
Yeah.
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 It's the cult of personality where you have that power imbalance that people get strange.
Right.
And it's the B-listers and the C-listers that want to be A-listers that are just coming off with a strange energy already.
Right. And bring me my Evian for my hair. I can't just have water from the shower. Yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. We had an experience with the Channing Tatum shoot was for a movie called Foxcatcher. Did you see this movie?
I did not.
It was kind of a dark film.
Okay.
A couple years ago, I was shooting for MovieMaker magazine at the Toronto Film Fest.
Okay.
And so it was directed by Bennett Miller. It was the guy who directed Moneyball.
Okay.
And The Big Short. I think he did some other
okay.
very cool movies.
Yeah, definitely.
And the actors in the movie were Steve Carell, Mark Ruffalo, Channing Tatum.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
I should see it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's a well done movie for sure. But we were shooting on the 9th floor of the Trump Tower, and we actually had a half an hour with each actor and then a half an hour to shoot the whole group of 4 to go on the cover of the magazine.
Oh.
And so the 3 actors were so great, and they were just malleable, if you wanted to do a jumping shot.
They were fun.
Yeah, they would just roll with anything. I was trapped on this floor of the hotel, so I didn't have very many options to make things look artsy and cool.
Right.
And the movie was dark and brooding, so the directives to me were don't shoot Steve Carell smiling.
Oh.
He's kind of the villain in the movie. So, there were some big window treatments that were 20 feet tall, so I had them peering out from behind the curtains.
Oh, I can't wait to see these.
Yeah, I'll send you the link.
Yeah.
And then the only other cool space on the floor was the men's bathroom was all black marble.
Okay.
So we shot Channing Tatum in the men's bathroom, and it was one stall and one urinal, So we go in there with my assistant, and it's a bunch of mirrors and black marble.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, dude, well, look into the mirror, and then just kind of looking at yourself, and then in Photoshop, I'll crack the mirror all out and make it look like your cracked psyche or whatever,
Whoa.
So I'm kind of in the sink trying to get him in this angle, and my assistant.
But not your reflection.
Yeah, totally.
Right.
And I don't want to see my assistant who's in the urinal pretty much holding the light, trying to not be. And we shoot for 5 minutes and we almost get it, and then the toilet flushes and someone was in the stall the whole time. Yeah, and there's this guy, and he looked like Inspector Clouseau. He looked like this 85-year-old French guy, and he was real mad.
Oh, that's pretty funny.
Yeah, he thought we were some weird kinky bathroom shooters.
That's hilarious. All right, let's see. What else do you want to share before we wrap it up today? Anything. You go. You run with it.
Well, I'll tell you about, we segued off before we talked about Lonely Planet. I'll tell you about the serendipity of meeting the Lonely Planet.
Yes,
and what
I want to hear.
To.
Yes.
Because like you were saying, when you look back, like these things were meant to happen, but you could not have predicted that.
Right.
So the sabbatical 20 years ago was with my girlfriend at the time, and we started in Melbourne. And there were no smartphones. There were internet cafes, but you had to go there to check your email, and the internet was fledgling and nation. So we bought this camper van, and we had a paper map, and it's Australia.
A paper map. What's that?
Can you imagine? Like a pirate map. Here there be dragons. It was like that. So we rolled it all out, and you're driving on the wrong side of the road. It was a stick shift Daihatsu Delta, and so you're shifting
on the right side of the car with the stick on your left hand, and you're on the left side of the road. That's how it is in Scotland.
Exactly.
Too. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I went to Isle of Skye and back by myself with all these freaking roundabouts where I had a post-it note: stay left, because I kept wanting to go right, and the gear shift on the left, and my brain hurt at the end of the day, driving 4 hours there and back. Just so I could hike up the Old Man of Store. Like, that was my goal. I want to hike up the Old Man of Store.
Oh, that's so spectacular.
It was, yeah.
But you're right, the roundabouts are the most dangerous parts.
Yeah.
And then continue. You end up staying in them for like 8 rotations, right? And you get this kid
you can't get out.
Shoots you out super fast.
Yeah, people are honking.
Yeah. Well, it's like that. So I was, a lot of concentration. And Nico, my girlfriend at the time, was, looking at the map, and we got lost in Footscray, the most beautifully named barrio of Melbourne. Right. And we drove past the Lonely Planet warehouse. I didn't even know that they were based there. Giant logo. And so, I'm like, let's hang out for a minute. And I had my little portfolio of like 10 best photos with me in my backpack.
Lucky.
Just in case, because I was working under the table, woofing, right? If somebody needed a photo for their business.
Sure.
So I just went in and met the first photo editor, and he was super kind. Mm-hmm. And so I started sending my travel photos to Lonely Planet after that.
That's great.
Yeah, and it would just be stock photos, but whatever, great sunset. Transparencies, so it was a hard thing to shoot. You had to nail the exposure. But then about 10 years after that, in 2009 or so, they sent an email to all of the writers and photographers on their list, and they were going to start, when there were more reality shows on TV, kind of at that time, they wanted to try to put their toes in the pool and do some, like 5 different shows. So they said, send in a 3-minute, audition tape, and we're going to take 10 different people to host the first season, and it was called Rose Less Traveled.
Oh, yeah.
And so I ended up, for my audition tape, I walked around Hotel Congress here in Tucson and talked about Dillinger.
Oh, as you should.
Yes, on a busy Saturday night, so it was jammed with people, and I weaved through the
brilliant.
crowd.
Yeah.
And then I drove down to Nogales, and I was haggling for like, some snakeskin boots or something.
Yep.
And so I got hired for the Spanish-speaking episodes, Colombia, Mexico, and Spain.
Fantastic.
And then Tony Wheeler, who was the owner, essentially, of Lonely Planet at the time, he did 2 or 3 episodes. And then that kind of parlayed off to a few different series that they did. We did like 4 or 5 different series for a couple of years. Yeah.
I would love a job like that. That had to have been pretty fun.
It was very fun. It was so random. Yeah. But the places,
basically to get paid for travel, period, would be amazing.
Exactly.
To see the world while you're paying your rent or mortgage or whatever. That's pretty awesome.
I know, it's pretty magical. And the coolest thing too with that, and with all photo jobs, is you get VIP access to places and people that you never would be able to, right?
Right.
You're in the back of the kitchen in the restaurant.
Yeah.
We did a story about playing polo with the Maharaja in Rajasthan. Never. I would be tased and removed from the premises normally. So to get to shoot that for 3 hours and meet people and ask questions, that part is super cool.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. Cool. And then what about the 12-year-old kid with a camera right now, or even their cell phone? Like, what would you suggest what can they do to actually make a living as a photographer?
Well, I think things have changed so much with the digital world, right? It's so different than analog. I really don't know if I went to a 4-year college and, trained. There were people that left film school 1 or 2 years in and took that money of the last year's tuition and went and made a film.
Yeah.
So, there was that mentality back then. I think now if you are ambitious and you have a passion about something, whatever the art is,
whatever it is, yeah,
you don't necessarily need to hemorrhage, $100,000 to go and get all these years of training and a plaque on the wall, because so many people are doing it with podcasts or filming their own. The quality of things that you can film on your phone right now,
I know,
8K
it's
video,
amazing. Yeah.
And edit them. I mean, we were cutting things by hand, splicing things by hand in the day. So I really do think anyone that has a passion for music, local bands, recording your own thing with like world-class quality recording equipment now, you can make it happen. And with YouTube and tutorials online, you can really teach yourself 90% of the things that you need to know. But I would say also the main recommendation, and the one lucky thing that I had was, being an apprentice and having a mentor gives you a whole different set of tools that you don't learn on YouTube.
Right.
Yeah.
You have to be there and doing it and having someone be like, this is the why.
Yeah, yeah. And the pragmatic things like, this is how you invoice, or this is how you cold call a client, this is how you make eye contact.
Definitely. Because people just don't know. No,
and it's, especially I think a little bit with millennials and Gen Zs too, some of the social stuff is a little bit harder than it maybe was for we Gen Xers. I was really lucky when I first was in Seattle because I started to assist with a fashion and hotel photog named Rocky Solsko. And he was this mad professor. He had Albert Einstein hair. And we'd be going in. It was great because he was super artsy with the fashion stuff. But when we'd go to shoot a hotel, he'd have 25 lights, and there were lights hidden, under the table and this and that. So he was master of lighting. But he was also a really nice guy, and he was the absent-minded professor. So he would usually be gesturing and inadvertently knock over a light stand, which would start a small fire.
Oh my goodness!
And then he'd be like, "Oh, fiddlesticks!" And then he'd go over and try to. It was just chaos, but he never got mad, and he was such a supportive guy. So it was nice to have a mentor to learn from.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So seek someone out. You can just write people, in your community. There are a lot of photographers here. They're always looking for assistance or people online that you really respect. Like, just don't be afraid to reach out to people because they're often more accepting than you'd expect.
Right. Just put it out there and know what you want to go for and just do it.
Yeah.
Follow through. Yeah.
Make it happen. It's the same thing with the motorcycle road trip.
Yep.
It's just been the best trip. It's been the best experience, I think, of my entire life.
I love it.
And I'm getting re-inspired. And now that a year and a half or 2 years have gone by of this 1 year sabbatical, I've officially decreed, I'll tell you here on your podcast, it's not going to end in Argentina. When I get to Montevideo, Uruguay, I'm going to put the bike on a cargo container ship to South Africa.
Yay!
And the next phase will be South Africa up to Tuscany.
I love it.
And then after that, we'll see where it is.
Yeah, I love it. I'm so excited for you. Can't wait to follow along your adventure. You'll post photos along the way, right?
Yes, I have been posting some to Instagram every day. But yeah, I think eventually there will be a book that will have a lot more text and insight and down the line. Yeah, when the timing is right.
Well, everyone can find Dominic Arizona Bonuccelli at gallerybonuccelli.com. So gallery and then BONUCCELLI.com. So 2 C's and 2 L's. And on Facebook, you're Arizona 44.
That is
me. Kind of random, but I like it. Yeah. So anyway, definitely check out Dominic's work and adventures and go out there and make something today.
Absolutely. Just do it. Yep. Make it happen.